There are moments in life when you realize that the people you grew up with, the people you shared your childhood with, are not who you thought they were. I never imagined that money could change someone so much. I never thought my own brother and sister would look at me like I was a stranger, like I was an enemy. But that's exactly what happened when our mother passed away. I still remember the day we gathered at the lawyer's office. Every detail is burned into my memory. The office was on the third floor of an old building downtown, the kind with narrow hallways that smelled like old paper and furniture polish. When I pushed open the heavy wooden door, the first thing I felt was the cold. Not just the temperature, though the air conditioning was running too high for a November afternoon. It was a different kind of cold, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes you want to wrap your arms around yourself. The room itself was all dark wood and leather. Heavy curtains blocked most of the natural light, leaving only the dim glow of a desk lamp to illuminate the space. There was a clock on the wall behind Mr. Hutchinson's desk, an old-fashioned one with a brass frame and a white face. It ticked, loud and steady. Tick, tick, tick. Each second felt like a hammer hitting an anvil. I became aware of that sound the moment I sat down, and I couldn't stop hearing it. It filled the silence between us like a heartbeat. Daniel was already there when I arrived. He sat in one of the leather chairs on the left side of the table, his back straight, his hands folded in his lap. He didn't look at me when I walked in, not even a glance, just a slight nod, the kind of acknowledgement you'd give a coworker, not a brother, not someone you'd built forts with in the backyard and stayed up late with, whispering secrets under blankets. Rebecca came in a few minutes after me. She took the chair on the right side of the table, as far from me as the room would allow. She set her purse down with a deliberate thud. The sound echoed in that cold, quiet space. She pulled out her phone and stared at it. Her jaw was tight. Her shoulders were hunched forward like she was protecting herself from something. And there I was, in the middle, physically and emotionally. I sat in the center chair, equidistant from both of them, and I felt the weight of that distance. It wasn't just the 3 feet of polished mahogany table between us. It was an ocean, a vast, dark, uncrossable ocean. I tried to catch Daniel's eye. I wanted to see something there, some flicker of the brother I knew, the one who used to ruffle my hair and call me kiddo, even though I was only 3 years younger. But he kept his gaze fixed on the window behind Mr. Hutchins. His expression was blank, unreadable. His fingers drummed once, twice, on the armrest of his chair, then stopped. Rebecca shifted in her seat. The leather creaked under her weight. She crossed her legs, then uncrossed them. Crossed her arms, then let them fall to her sides. She was uncomfortable. We all were. But no one said anything. The silence stretched and stretched, broken only by that relentless ticking. Tick, tick, tick. I could hear my own breathing, shallow and uneven. I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning vent above us. His expression was gentle but grave. He'd known our family for years. He'd drawn up my father's will, and now he was here to read our mother's. He said, "Thank you all for coming." His voice was soft, but it seemed loud in that quiet room. Daniel shifted slightly. Rebecca set her phone face down on the table. I clasped my hands together to stop them from shaking. Mr. Hutchins opened the folder in front of him. The papers inside were crisp and white, official, final. He said, "I know this is a difficult time. I want you to know that your mother put a great deal of thought into her wishes. She wanted to make sure everything was clear, that there would be no confusion. But I could already feel it, the confusion, the tension. It was in the air, thick and heavy like the cold. It was in the way Daniel's jaw clenched, in the way Rebecca's fingers tapped against her thigh, in the way none of us could look at each other. The clock ticked. Tick, tick, tick. And then Mr. Hutchins began to read. I felt my heart pounding in my chest. I felt the leather of the chair sticking to the back of my legs. I felt the coldness of the room wrapping around me like a shroud. But most of all, I felt the distance, the impossible, aching distance between me and the two people I had grown up with, the two people I thought I knew better than anyone in the world. When the lawyer started reading Mom's will, I felt my heart break. Not because of what was written in it, but because of what I saw in their eyes when they finally looked at me. Daniel leaned forward, his eyes narrowed, his hands gripped the armrests of his chair. Rebecca's face went hard. Her lips pressed into a thin line, her nostrils flared. And in that moment, sitting in that cold, dark room, with the clock ticking and the silence screaming, I realized something that made my stomach drop. I had already lost them, not to death, but to something worse, to the idea that things mattered more than we did. To the belief that what Mom left behind was more important than what she had tried to teach us. I want to tell you this story, not because I'm angry. I'm not anymore. But because I think someone out there might be going through the same thing, and I want you to know that you're not alone. I want you to know that sometimes the coldest rooms aren't the ones with air conditioning turned too high. They're the ones where family sits together and feels miles apart. The clock kept ticking, and we kept sitting there. 3 siblings, 1 table, an ocean between us. Let me take you back to the beginning, to a time when things were simple, when we were just 3 kids running around in our backyard, laughing until our stomachs hurt. I grew up in a small town in Ohio. Our house was nothing fancy. It was a 2-story home with blue shutters and a porch that creaked when you walked on it. My father built that porch himself. He wasn't a carpenter, but he wanted to give my mother a place to sit in the evenings and watch the sunset. She loved that porch. She would sit there with her tea, and we would sit with her, talking about everything and nothing. My father passed away when I was 17. Daniel was 20, and Rebecca was 15. It was sudden. A heart attack. One day he was there, fixing the fence, humming a tune. The next day, he was gone. I remember my mother didn't cry at the funeral. She just stood there, staring at the casket, her face pale and empty. It wasn't until weeks later, when we were all asleep, that I heard her, soft sobs coming from her bedroom. I wanted to go to her, but I didn't. I was young. I didn't know what to say. After Dad died, things changed. Daniel, being the oldest, took on a lot of responsibility. He started working 2 jobs to help pay the bills. He was always serious, always worried about money. I think losing Dad made him that way. He felt like he had to be the man of the house, and he was. He took care of us. Rebecca was different. She was the baby of the family, and she knew how to use that. Mom spoiled her a little, I won't lie, but Rebecca was also the most sensitive of us. She felt things deeply. When Dad died, she became quieter. She stopped laughing as much. I think she kept a lot of her pain inside. And then there was me. I was the middle child, the peacemaker, the one who always tried to keep everyone happy. I didn't mind. I loved my family. I loved the chaos and the noise and the little arguments that never meant anything. I loved the way we would all gather around the dinner table on Sundays, passing dishes and telling stories. I thought that would last forever. Mom never remarried. She said Dad was the love of her life and no one could replace him. She focused on us. She worked as a secretary at the local school. It wasn't much, but it was enough. She always made sure we had what we needed. She sacrificed a lot for us. I know that now. As we grew older, we all went our separate ways. Daniel got married to a woman named Karen. They had 2 kids, a boy and a girl. He moved to the next town over, about 30 minutes away. Rebecca went to college and became a teacher. She moved to the city, about 2 hours away. And I stayed. I stayed in our little town. I got a job at the library, and I rented a small apartment not far from Mom's house. I visited her almost every day. I think that's where the resentment started, though I didn't see it at the time. Daniel and Rebecca lived their lives. They called Mom on holidays and birthdays. They visited maybe once a month, if that. But I was there. I was the one who took her to doctor's appointments. I was the one who fixed things around the house when they broke. I was the one who sat with her on that creaky porch and listened to her talk about Dad. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because I loved her, because she was my mom, and because I couldn't imagine her being alone. But looking back, I think Daniel and Rebecca saw it differently. I think they thought I was trying to get closer to her for a reason. I think they thought I had an agenda. And maybe, in some twisted way, that made what happened later feel justified to them. Mom started getting sick about 3 years before she passed. It was her heart, the same thing that took Dad. The doctor said it was genetic. She needed medication, regular checkups, and rest. I took her to every appointment. I made sure she took her pills. I cooked meals for her and brought them over. Daniel and Rebecca would call and ask how she was doing, but they rarely came to visit. They were busy, they said. They had their own lives. I understood. I really did. But I also felt the weight of it, the responsibility, the loneliness of being the only one there. There was one visit, though, one afternoon that I think changed everything, even though I didn't realize it at the time. It was a Saturday in late spring, about a year before Mom passed. Rebecca had called the day before and said she was coming to visit. She said she'd be there around noon. I was glad. I thought it would be good for Mom to see her. That morning, I went over to Mom's house early. I wanted to tidy up a bit, make sure everything was nice for Rebecca's visit. I vacuumed the living room. I washed the dishes. I put fresh flowers in a vase on the kitchen table. Mom was having a good day. She was sitting on the porch, wrapped in her favorite shawl, watching the birds at the feeder. When Rebecca arrived, she parked in the driveway and walked up to the porch. I met her at the door. I said, "Hey, Mom's on the porch. She's been looking forward to seeing you." Rebecca smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. She said, "Thanks." She walked past me and went out to the porch. I followed her. Mom's face lit up when she saw Rebecca. She said, "Oh, sweetheart, come here." Rebecca bent down and hugged her. Mom held on tight, and I saw tears in her eyes. She said, "I've missed you so much." Rebecca said, "I've missed you too, Mom." They sat together on the porch, talking and laughing. I stood in the doorway, watching them, feeling happy that Rebecca was there. After a while, I said, "I'm going to make some tea. Would you like some?" Mom said, "That would be lovely, dear." Rebecca didn't say anything. She just nodded. I went inside and put the kettle on. I could hear them talking through the open window. Mom was asking Rebecca about work, about her students. Rebecca was telling her about a field trip she'd organized. They sounded happy. When the tea was ready, I brought it out on a tray with some cookies I'd baked the day before. I set it down on the small table between them. Mom said, "Oh, these cookies look wonderful. Did you make these?" I said, "Yes, they're your favorite, oatmeal raisin." Mom smiled at me. She said, "You're so good to me." I saw something flicker across Rebecca's face, something I couldn't quite name, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. We sat together for a while, sipping tea and talking. Then Mom said she was feeling a little tired. She wanted to lie down for a bit. I said, "Let me help you inside." Mom said, "Thank you, sweetheart." I took her arm and helped her up. She moved slowly, leaning on me. I guided her inside and into her bedroom. I helped her into bed and pulled the blanket up over her. She said, "You're such a blessing to me. I don't know what I'd do without you." I kissed her forehead. I said, "I love you, Mom." She closed her eyes and smiled. When I came back out to the living room, Rebecca was standing by the window, looking out at the yard. Her arms were crossed. I said, "She's resting now." Rebecca turned to look at me. Her expression was strange, guarded. She said, "You've really taken over, haven't you?" I blinked. I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "This, all of this."
The cleaning, the cooking, the helping her to bed. You've made yourself indispensable. I felt a knot form in my stomach. I said, "I'm just helping her. She needs someone here."
Rebecca said, "Does she? Or do you just like being the favorite?" The words stung. I said, "That's not fair." She said, "Isn't it? You're here all the time. You know what pills she takes, what she likes to eat, when she needs to rest. You've inserted yourself into every part of her life. And now, when I visit, I feel like a guest, like I need your permission to spend time with my own mother." I said, "Rebecca, that's not what I'm trying to do." She said, "Then what are you trying to do?" I didn't know how to answer that. I said, "I'm just trying to take care of her." Rebecca shook her head. She said, "You're trying to be the hero, the good daughter, the one who stayed. And you want everyone to see it." I felt tears prick my eyes. I said, "That's not true." She said, "Isn't it? Why did you have to clean the whole house before I got here? Why did you have to make cookies? Why do you have to be the one to help her to bed? Can't I do those things? Can't Daniel?" I said, "You can. I never said you couldn't." She said, "But you don't give us the chance. You're always here, always doing everything, and it makes the rest of us look bad." I stared at her. I said, "I'm not trying to make you look bad. I'm just trying to help." Rebecca picked up her purse. She said, "Well, maybe you should help a little less. Maybe you should give the rest of us room to be there for her too." I said, "Rebecca, please, don't leave like this." She said, "I'm not leaving. I'm going to sit with Mom for a while, alone, if that's okay with you." She walked past me and went into Mom's bedroom, closing the door behind her. I stood there in the living room, feeling like I'd been punched in the chest. I didn't understand. I didn't know what I'd done wrong. I was just trying to take care of Mom. That's all I'd ever tried to do. But in Rebecca's eyes, I saw something else. Suspicion, resentment, the belief that I was doing all of this for some ulterior motive, that I was playing a game, that I was trying to win something. And maybe, in that moment, the seeds of what would happen later were already being planted. I left the house that day feeling confused and hurt. When Rebecca came out an hour later, she didn't say goodbye. She just got in her car and drove away. Mom asked me later why Rebecca seemed upset. I told her I didn't know. I didn't want to burden her with our conflict. But I think Mom sensed something. She looked at me with sad, knowing eyes and said, "Family is complicated, isn't it?" I nodded. I said, "Yes, it is." She said, "But it's worth fighting for. Remember that." I said, "I will, Mom." But I didn't know then how hard that fight would be. I didn't know that Rebecca's words that day, her accusations about me being controlling and taking over, would echo in the lawyer's office a year later. I didn't know that Daniel felt the same way, even if he never said it out loud. I didn't know that in their minds, I wasn't the devoted daughter taking care of her sick mother. I was the schemer, the manipulator, the one with an agenda. And when Mom's will was read, when that letter was revealed, all of those suspicions would come rushing to the surface. All of those unspoken resentments would explode, because they had already decided who I was, and nothing I said or did would change their minds. One day, about 6 months before Mom passed, she called me over. She was sitting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket even though it was warm outside. She looked tired, more tired than usual. She said, "Sit with me." I sat down beside her and we watched the sun go down. The sky was orange and pink, the kind of sunset that makes you feel like the world is beautiful, even when it's breaking your heart. She said, "I need to talk to you about something." I looked at her. Her face was serious. She said, "I've been thinking about the house, about what happens when I'm gone." I said, "Mom, don't talk like that." She smiled, a sad, tired smile. She said, "I have to, sweetheart. I'm not going to be here forever, and I need to make sure things are fair. I need to make sure you all are okay. I didn't say anything. I just held her hand. She said, I'm going to leave the house to all three of you, equal shares. I want you to decide together what to do with it. Maybe one of you will want to live here. Maybe you'll sell it. I don't know, but I want you to decide together, as a family. I nodded. I said, we will, Mom. Don't worry. But even then, I felt a knot in my stomach. I didn't know why. Maybe it was intuition.
Maybe some part of me already knew that things wouldn't go the way Mom hoped. Maybe some part of me remembered Rebecca's face that day on the porch, the suspicion, the resentment, and maybe some part of me knew that when the time came, Daniel and Rebecca wouldn't see me as their sister. They would see me as the enemy. Mom passed away on a cold Tuesday morning in November. I got the call from the hospice nurse. Mom had been moved to hospice care 2 weeks earlier. Her heart was failing, and there was nothing more the doctors could do. I had been staying with her, sleeping in a chair beside her bed. Daniel and Rebecca had come to visit once, briefly. They said their goodbyes, then they left. When she took her last breath, I was holding her hand. I whispered to her that it was okay to go, that Dad was waiting for her, that we would be okay. I don't know if she heard me, but I hope she did. The funeral was small, just family and a few of Mom's friends from church. Daniel stood beside me, stiff and quiet. Rebecca cried softly, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I felt numb, like I was watching everything from far away. After the funeral, we all went back to Mom's house. It felt empty without her. The porch creaked under our feet as we walked inside. The smell of her lavender candles still lingered in the air. I wanted to sit down and cry, but Daniel said we needed to talk. We sat in the living room, Daniel on the couch, Rebecca in Dad's old armchair, and me on the love seat by the window. Daniel cleared his throat. He said, we need to figure out what to do with the house. I nodded. I said, Mom wanted us to decide together. Rebecca said, I think we should sell it. I looked at her. I said, sell it? She said, yes. None of us live here. It doesn't make sense to keep it. Daniel said, I agree. We can split the money 3 ways. It's fair. I felt my chest tighten. I said, but this is Mom's house. This is where we grew up, Rebecca said. I know, but it's just a house. We have our own lives now, I said. It's not just a house to me, Daniel said. What do you mean? I said, I mean, I've been taking care of it. I've been taking care of Mom for years. You both were busy with your lives. I was the one here. Rebecca's face changed. Her eyes narrowed. She said, are you saying you deserve more? I said, no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying maybe we should think about this more. Maybe we don't have to rush into selling. Daniel leaned forward. He said, what do you want to do with it then? I hesitated. I said, I don't know. Maybe I could live here. Maybe I could buy your shares. Rebecca laughed, a short, sharp laugh that cut through the air like a knife. She said, buy our shares? With what money? I felt my face flush. I said, I don't know. I haven't thought it through yet. I'm just saying we should talk about it. Daniel said, there's nothing to talk about. Mom left the house to all 3 of us, equal shares. We sell it and we split the money. That's fair. I said, fair? Is it fair that I was the one here all these years while you 2 were off living your lives? The words came out harsher than I intended. The room went silent. Rebecca sat up straighter. Her voice was ice. She said, that was your choice. I stared at her. I said, my choice? She said, yes. No one forced you to stay in this town. No one forced you to work at the library your whole life. You chose to stay. You chose not to do anything with your life. I felt like I'd been slapped. I said, what are you talking about? Daniel said, she's right. You act like you made some huge sacrifice, but the truth is you stayed because it was easier. You stayed because you couldn't cut it out there in the real world.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I said, "That's not true." Rebecca said, "Isn't it? Daniel and I both left. We both built careers. We both have families and responsibilities. But you just stayed here, safe, comfortable, working your little library job and living in your little apartment." Daniel said, "And now you want us to feel guilty about it. You want us to think we abandoned Mom, but we didn't. We had lives, real lives, something you never bothered to build." I felt tears burning behind my eyes. I said, "I stayed because Mom needed someone." Rebecca said, "Mom didn't need someone. You needed her. You needed an excuse not to grow up, not to move on, not to face the world." Daniel said, "Face it, you stayed because you were scared, and now you're trying to make yourself the hero of the story, the devoted daughter who sacrificed everything. But really, you just took the easy way out." I stood up. My whole body was shaking. I said, "How dare you? I took care of her. I was there when she was sick. I was there when she was lonely. Where were you?" Daniel stood up too. His face was red. He said, "I was building a life. I was raising my kids. I was working 60-hour weeks to provide for my family. I didn't have time to sit around drinking tea on the porch every day." Rebecca said, "We couldn't be here. We had responsibilities. But you had all the time in the world because you never did anything else." I said, "That's not fair." Daniel said, "No, what's not fair is you acting like you're better than us, like you loved Mom more, like we didn't care. We cared, but we also had lives." Rebecca said, "And honestly, maybe if you had a life too, you wouldn't have been here every single day, smothering her." I felt my breath catch. I said, "Smothering her?" Rebecca said, "Yes, you were always here, always hovering, always making decisions for her. Did you ever think that maybe she wanted space? Maybe she wanted to see us without you being the gatekeeper?" I said, "I never tried to keep you away." Daniel said, "Didn't you? Every time I called, you were there. Every time Rebecca visited, you'd already cleaned, already cooked, already done everything. You didn't leave room for anyone else." Rebecca said, "You made it so we always felt like guests in our own mother's house, like we needed your permission to be there." I said, "That's not what I was trying to do." Daniel said, "Then what were you trying to do? Because from where we're standing, it looks like you were setting yourself up, making yourself indispensable so that when this day came, you'd have the upper hand." I stared at him. I said, "You think I wanted this? You think I wanted Mom to die?" Rebecca said, "No, but I think you wanted to be the favorite, and I think you succeeded." The words hung in the air between us, heavy, poisonous. I said quietly, "I can't believe you're saying this. I can't believe you think this is what I was doing." Daniel sat back down. He rubbed his face with his hands. When he spoke again, his voice was tired. He said, "Look, it doesn't matter now. What matters is the house. We need to sell it. We need to move on." Rebecca said, "Daniel's right. Let's just get this over with. We'll list it with a realtor, sell it, split the money, and be done." I said, "Just like that? We sell the house where we grew up and we're done?" Daniel said, "What else do you want?" I looked at both of them, at their closed faces, at the way they wouldn't quite meet my eyes, and I realized something. They weren't angry at me, not really. They were angry at themselves. They were angry because they knew they hadn't been there. They knew they'd left Mom to me. And instead of facing that guilt, instead of sitting with that discomfort, they were turning it into anger. They were making me the villain so they didn't have to be. But I couldn't say that. I couldn't force them to see it. So I said, "Fine, sell the house. Do whatever you want." Rebecca said, "Don't be dramatic." I said, "I'm not being dramatic. I'm just done arguing. You've already made up your minds about me, about what kind of person I am, so there's no point in talking anymore." Daniel said, "We haven't made up our minds about anything." I looked at him. I said, yes, you have. You think I'm pathetic. You think I stayed here because I couldn't make it anywhere else. You think I used Mom to make myself feel important. That's what you think. Neither of them denied it. I picked up my purse. I said, I need to go. Rebecca said, we're not finished. I said, yes, we are. Call me when you've made arrangements with the realtor. I'll sign whatever you need me to sign. I walked to the door. My hand was on the knob when Daniel said, you know what your problem is? I stopped. I didn't turn around. He said, you can't accept that the rest of us moved on. You're stuck in the past, and you want us to be stuck there too. But we're not. We have futures. And we're not going to let you guilt us into giving up what we've earned just because you chose to stay behind. I opened the door. I said, I never asked you to give up anything, Daniel. I just wanted you to be here. That's all I ever wanted. And I left. I drove home with tears streaming down my face. I couldn't stop shaking. Their words echoed in my head. Couldn't cut it in the real world. Took the easy way out, smothering her. Pathetic. Was that really how they saw me? Was that what they thought? Over the next few weeks, things got worse. Daniel and Rebecca wanted to put the house on the market immediately. I asked for more time. I wanted to go through Mom's things. I wanted to keep some of her belongings. They said I was stalling. They said I was being selfish. We had meeting after meeting, sometimes at the lawyer's office, sometimes on the phone. Every conversation ended in an argument. Every argument left me feeling more alone. One day, Rebecca called me.
She said, I talked to a real estate agent. She thinks we can get a good price for the house. I said, Rebecca, I told you I need more time. She said, time for what? To figure out how to take the house for yourself? I said, that's not fair. Isn't it? You've been acting like this house belongs to you, like you're the only one who cared about Mom. I said, I never said that. You didn't have to. You've been making it clear since the funeral, with your tears and your I was the one who was here speeches. We get it. You were here. Congratulations. Do you want a medal? I felt anger rise in my chest. I said, why are you being so cruel? She said, I'm not being cruel. I'm being honest. You want us to feel guilty. You want us to think we're bad people because we had jobs and families and lives outside of this town. But we're not bad people. We just didn't have the luxury of staying in one place forever. I said, it wasn't a luxury, Rebecca. It was a choice.
A choice I made because I loved her. Rebecca said, well, we loved her too, and we're not going to let you take this house just because you happen to live closer. I said, I don't want to take anything from you. She said, then stop fighting the sale. Let us sell it. Let us move on. I just think we should honor Mom's wishes. She wanted us to decide together. Rebecca said, we are deciding together. Daniel and I both want to sell. That's 2 against 1. I felt my heart sink. I said, so that's how it is? You and Daniel against me? She didn't answer right away. Then she said, if that's how you want to see it. And she hung up. I sat there, holding the phone, feeling the weight of her words. 2 against 1. That's what it had become. Not a family, but sides, battle lines. And I was losing. The breaking point came a few weeks later. The lawyer called us all in for a final meeting. He said there were some details in Mom's will that needed to be clarified. I didn't know what he meant, but I went. When I arrived, Daniel and Rebecca were already there. They were sitting on one side of the table, whispering to each other. I sat on the other side, alone. The lawyer, Mr. Hutchins, was an older man with gray hair and kind eyes. He had known our family for years. He looked at us with something like sadness. He said, I asked you all here because there's been some confusion about the distribution of the estate. I said, what kind of confusion? He opened a folder and pulled out some papers. He said, your mother left a letter. She asked me to read it to you after the will was settled. My heart started beating faster. I said, a letter? He nodded. He said, she wrote it a few months before she passed. She wanted to explain her decisions. He adjusted his glasses and began to read. If you're hearing this, it means I'm gone.
I want you to know that I love you all equally. You are my greatest joy and my greatest pride. Each of you carries a piece of my heart, and nothing in this world could change that. But I also know that love doesn't always mean equal. Love means understanding. It means seeing each person for who they are, for what they've given, and for what they've sacrificed. I've left the house to all three of you, as I told you I would. Equal shares. That is fair, and that is right. But I've also left a separate fund, a small savings account that I've been putting money into for years. It's not much in the grand scheme of things, but it represents something far more valuable than dollars and cents. I'm leaving this fund to your sister. Not because I love her more, not because she's more deserving of my affection, but because she gave up things that cannot be measured or repaid. Daniel, you built a beautiful life, a career, a family, children who will carry your name into the future. You worked hard for those things, and I'm so proud of you. Rebecca, you followed your dreams. You became a teacher. You shaped young minds. You built a life in the city full of purpose and possibility. That took courage, and I admire you for it. But your sister made a different choice. She stayed. Not because it was easier, not because she couldn't do anything else, but because she heard a call that the rest of the world doesn't applaud. The call of quiet sacrifice, the call of presence. She gave up job opportunities because they would have taken her away from me.
She turned down a chance to move to Boston, to work at a university library, because it would have meant leaving me alone. She dated less, socialized less, built less of her own life because she was busy building mine. Love, I've learned, is not always loud. It's not always celebrated. Sometimes love is showing up on a Tuesday afternoon to take someone to a doctor's appointment. Sometimes love is sitting in silence because you know that silence needs a witness. Sometimes love is putting your own dreams on a shelf, quietly, without fanfare, because someone else needs you more. That is what your sister did. She didn't do it for recognition. She didn't do it for money. She did it because she has a heart that knows how to hold vigil, how to tend to the small, unglamorous moments that make up a life, how to sit with someone in their weakness and make them feel less alone. I know she'll never ask you to acknowledge this. She'll never demand that you see what she gave up. But I'm asking you.
I'm begging you, see her. This money is not a reward, it's a recognition. A small gesture to say, I saw what you did. I saw the promotions you didn't take, the relationships that faded because you were always here with me, the dreams you deferred because my dreams had ended and I needed someone to sit with me in that ending. You cannot buy back time. You cannot buy back presence. But I can at least offer this small acknowledgement that time and presence are worth something. Please, my children, don't let this divide you. Don't let money or property become more important than the bond you share. You are blood. You are family. And that is worth more than any inheritance I could ever leave behind. Love is not a competition. It's not about who did more or who deserves more. It's about recognizing that we all give what we can in the ways we can. And sometimes one person's what I can give looks different from another's. Daniel, Rebecca, you gave me pride. You gave me joy in your accomplishments. You gave me grandchildren and stories of the wide world beyond this porch. But your sister gave me herself, day after day, year after year, in the small hours, in the quiet moments, in the unglamorous, unwitnessed work of simply being there. And for that, I am grateful beyond words. I hope you can understand. I hope you can forgive me if this causes pain. But more than anything, I hope you can see your sister the way I see her. Not as someone who took advantage, not as someone who manipulated or schemed, but as someone who loved me in the most patient, most selfless, most enduring way a person can love. Hold each other close. Life is short, and in the end, all we have is each other. With all my love, always, Mom. The room was silent. I felt tears streaming down my face. I hadn't known about the savings account. I hadn't known Mom saw all of those things, all of those sacrifices I never named. The job in Boston. I'd told her about it.
She'd encouraged me to take it, but I saw the fear in her eyes, the fear of being alone. So I said no. I told her it wasn't the right fit. I never told her the real reason. The relationships. There was a man once, someone I cared about, but he lived 3 states away and wanted me to move. I chose Mom instead. I never regretted it, but I never told anyone about it either. The quiet, unwitnessed work, the daily presence, the way I rearranged my entire life around her needs and never once asked anyone to notice. Mom had noticed. Rebecca's face was red. She said, "How much?" Mr. Hutchins said, $43,000. Daniel stood up. His chair scraped against the floor, harsh and loud in the quiet room. He said, "Are you kidding me?" Mr. Hutchins said, "It was your mother's wish." Rebecca said, "This is unbelievable. She's already getting 1/3 of the house, and now this?" I said, "I didn't know about this, I swear." Daniel looked at me.
His eyes were cold, hard, empty of the brother I once knew. He said, "Didn't you?" I felt like I'd been slapped. I said, "What are you saying?" He said, "I'm saying it's convenient. You stay close to Mom for years. You're the only one around. You make sure we feel guilty every time we visit. And now you get extra money. Funny how that worked out." Rebecca said, she probably convinced Mom to do this, probably sat there on that porch, feeding her stories about how hard her life was, how much she sacrificed, making herself the martyr. I stood up. My whole body was shaking. I said, "How dare you? I took care of her because I loved her, not for money." Daniel said, "Then give it back. Split it 3 ways." I stared at him. I said, "Mom wanted me to have it." Rebecca said, "Mom was old. She was sick. She wasn't thinking clearly." I felt my anger rise, hot and sharp. I said, "She was perfectly clear. She wrote that letter months before she died. She knew exactly what she was doing."
"She saw what I gave up. Even if you can't," Daniel said. "What you gave up? You gave up nothing. You stayed in this town because you were too scared to leave. You clung to Mom because you had nothing else. And now you want us to pay you for it." Rebecca said, "You didn't sacrifice anything. You just lived your small, safe life and called it devotion." I felt something break inside me, something that had been holding on, hoping, believing that underneath all this anger, my brother and sister still loved me. But looking at their faces, I knew the truth. They didn't see me. They didn't see the nights I spent awake, worried about Mom's breathing. They didn't see the job I turned down, the man I let go, the life I could have had. They didn't see any of it. All they saw was someone who got something they didn't. I said quietly, "She called it love as a quiet sacrifice. Do you know what that means?" Daniel said, "It means she felt sorry for you." The words cut deeper than anything else he could have said. I picked up my purse. I said, "I'm keeping the money because it's what she wanted, because she saw something in me that you refused to see." Rebecca grabbed her purse. She said, "Fine, keep it, but don't expect us to be okay with this. Don't expect us to pretend like everything is fine." She walked toward the door. Then she stopped and turned back to me. She said, "You know what? Maybe you did sacrifice. Maybe you did give things up, but you chose that. No one forced you. And the fact that you want us to celebrate you for it, the fact that you want to be rewarded for doing what you chose to do, that's what makes this so disgusting." Daniel said, "We all make choices. We chose to build lives. You chose to stay small. That's on you." He followed Rebecca out. The door closed behind them with a soft click that echoed in the silent room. I stood there,
alone in the lawyer's office, feeling like my entire world had just collapsed.
Feeling like I'd lost everything that mattered, Mr. Hutchins looked at me with pity. He said, "I'm sorry. I know this is hard." I wiped my tears. I said, "They hate me." He said, "They don't hate you. They're hurt. They're grieving. And sometimes grief makes people say things they don't mean." But I knew better. I had seen the look in their eyes. That wasn't grief. That was something colder, something darker. They had read Mom's letter. They had heard her words about quiet sacrifice, about presence, about love as the unglamorous work of simply being there. And they had rejected all of it, because accepting it would mean accepting that they hadn't been there, that they had chosen differently, that their choices, however valid, however understandable, came with a cost, and it was easier to hate me than to face that cost. So they chose hate. They chose resentment. They chose to believe I was the villain in a story where I had only ever tried to be the caretaker. I left the lawyer's office that day knowing I had lost my brother and sister. Not to death, but to something worse, to pride, to guilt they couldn't face, to the terrible human need to be right, even when being right means destroying the people you love. The next few months were the hardest of my life. Daniel and Rebecca stopped talking to me. They communicated only through the lawyer. We put the house on the market, and it sold within a few weeks. We split the money 3 ways, just like Mom wanted, but the money felt heavy in my hands, like it was tainted. I moved into a new apartment, smaller than the one I had before. I kept some of Mom's things, her favorite blanket, a photo album, her lavender candles. I thought having them would make me feel closer to her, but they just made me feel more alone. I tried calling Daniel. He didn't answer. I sent Rebecca a text message. She didn't respond. It was like I had become invisible to them. I went to therapy. My therapist was a kind woman named Dr. Lynn. She listened to my story without judgment. She said, "You did nothing wrong." I said, "Then why do I feel so guilty?" She said, "Because you care, because you love them, and because losing them hurts more than anything else." She was right. The money didn't matter, the house didn't matter. What mattered was that I had lost my brother and sister, the people I grew up with, the people I thought would always be there. One night, about 6 months after the funeral, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Mom, about her letter, about the look on Daniel and Rebecca's faces. I sat down and wrote them each a letter. I didn't know if they would read them, but I needed to say what was in my heart. To Daniel, I wrote, "I know you're angry with me. I know you think I manipulated Mom, but I didn't. I just loved her. I stayed because I couldn't imagine her being alone. I stayed because you and Rebecca had your own lives, and I didn't want her to feel forgotten. I'm sorry if that hurt you. I'm sorry if you feel like I took something from you, but I didn't. Mom made her own choices, and I was just trying to honor her. I miss you. I miss the brother you used to be, the one who taught me how to ride a bike and defended me at school. I hope one day you can forgive me, not for what I did, but for what you think I did." To Rebecca, I wrote, "I've been thinking a lot about when we were kids, about how you used to follow me around and ask me to play with you. I always said yes, remember? Because you were my little sister, and I loved you. I still do. I know you think I hurt you. I know you think I was selfish, but I wasn't trying to take anything from you. I was just trying to be there for Mom, the way I tried to be there for you when we were growing up. I don't know if you'll ever talk to me again, but I want you to know that I forgive you for the things you said, for the way you looked at me, because I understand. Grief makes us do and say things we don't mean, and I hope one day you'll understand me too." I mailed the letters, and then I waited. Weeks passed, then months. I didn't hear anything. I started to accept that maybe this was how it would be, that maybe some relationships can't be repaired, that maybe sometimes love isn't enough. But then, one day, almost a year after Mom's funeral, I got a text message. It was from Rebecca. It said, "Can we talk?" My heart leaped. I replied immediately. I said, "Yes, anytime." She said, "Tomorrow? Coffee?" I said yes. The next day, I met her at a small cafe near her place. She looked older, tired, but she smiled when she saw me, a small, hesitant smile. We sat down. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then she said, "I read your letter." I said, "I meant every word." She nodded. She said, "I know, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the things I said.
I'm sorry for how I treated you. I felt tears in my eyes. I said, I'm sorry too. I never wanted to hurt you. She said, you didn't. I was angry and sad, and I didn't know how to deal with it, so I took it out on you. I reached across the table and held her hand. I said, I forgive you. She squeezed my hand. She said, thank you. We talked for hours about Mom, about Dad, about everything we had lost. It wasn't perfect. There were still some hard feelings, but it was a start. Daniel took longer, much longer. About 6 months after my coffee with Rebecca, he finally reached out. But what changed his heart wasn't my letter. It was something else entirely. It was a Saturday afternoon when he called. His voice sounded different, heavier, worn down. He said, "Can I come see you?" I said, of course. He came over that evening. When I opened the door, I barely recognized him. He looked like he'd aged 10 years. His shoulders were slumped. His eyes were red.
We sat in my small living room. He stared at his hands for a long time before he spoke. He said, "Something happened last week."
I waited. He said, my kids, they got into a fight, a bad one, over a video game controller. My son claimed it was his. My daughter said it was hers. They screamed at each other. They said terrible things. And then my son said something that it stopped me cold. He paused. His voice cracked when he continued. He said, you always get everything. You're the favorite. And my daughter, she said, that's not true. Daniel put his head in his hands. He said, I heard us. I heard me and Rebecca in their voices, and it made me sick. I didn't say anything. I just listened. He said, I sent them to their rooms, and then I went into the garage. I was so angry, not at them, at myself. I just started going through boxes, looking for I don't know what, something to ground me. He looked up at me. His eyes were wet. He said, I found Dad's old toolbox, the one he used to build that porch. It was covered in dust, pushed into a corner, and inside there was a note, folded up under the hammer. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a yellowed piece of paper. He unfolded it carefully. He said, it's Dad's handwriting. He handed it to me. I read it. These are just tools, wood and nails and screws, but what you build with them matters. I built this porch so your mother would have a place to watch the sunset, so our family would have a place to sit together. Things break, wood rots, houses fall apart, but family, if you take care of it, lasts forever. Don't fight over things. Don't let money or property come between you. Those are just tools too.
They're only valuable if they bring you together, not tear you apart. Love each other. That's the only thing I'm leaving you that matters. Dad. I felt tears streaming down my face. I handed the note back to Daniel. He folded it carefully and put it back in his pocket. He said, Dad wrote that when he built the porch, 25 years ago, and I found it the same week my kids were tearing each other apart over a piece of plastic. He looked at me, really looked at me.
for the first time in over a year. He said, I became everything Dad didn't want me to be. I let money come between us. I let property tear us apart. And worse, I convinced myself I was right, that you were the problem, that you had somehow cheated or manipulated Mom. I said, Daniel. He held up his hand. He said, no, let me finish. I've been thinking about this for days, ever since I found that note, and I realized something. I was angry at you because I was ashamed of myself. His voice broke completely now. He said, I wasn't there when Mom was sick, when she was dying, when she needed someone to hold her hand and tell her it was going to be okay. I wasn't there, and you were. Every single day, you were there. He wiped his eyes roughly. He said, and instead of thanking you, instead of being grateful that Mom wasn't alone, I made you the villain, because it was easier than admitting that I had failed, that I had chosen my career, my comfort, my life, over being there for her. I said, you didn't fail. You had a family. You had responsibilities. He shook his head. He said, so did you, but you made different choices. You sacrificed things I wasn't willing to sacrifice, and Mom saw that. She recognized it, and she tried to honor it in the only way she knew how. He looked down at his hands again. He said, and I threw it back in her face. I spit on her love and her wisdom because my pride couldn't handle the truth, that I wasn't the good son I thought I was. I moved to sit beside him on the couch. I took his hand. I said, you're a good man, Daniel, a good father, a good brother. You were hurting. We all were. He said, I watched my kids fighting. I watched them accuse each other of being loved more, of getting more, of deserving more. And I thought, this is my legacy. This is what I'm teaching them, that family is a competition. He looked at me with desperate eyes. He said, that's not what Dad wanted for us. That's not what Mom wanted. And it's not what I want for my kids. I said, it's not too late to change. He said, I was wrong about everything, about you, about Mom, about what matters. You didn't manipulate her. You didn't scheme. You just loved her, the way Dad loved her when he built that porch, quietly, steadily, without needing applause. I felt my throat tighten. He said, I came here to say I'm sorry and to ask if you can forgive me. I don't deserve it. I know that, but I'm asking anyway. I looked at my brother, at the man who had once carried me on his shoulders, who had taught me how to throw a baseball, who had walked me to school on my first day because I was scared. I said, I forgive you. He looked at me like he couldn't believe it. He said, just like that? I said, just like that. Because you're my brother, and I love you. And because Dad was right. Things break. Houses fall apart. But family, if you take care of it, lasts forever. He pulled me into a hug. We sat there on my small couch, holding each other, and crying like we were kids again, like we were back in that house with the blue shutters and the creaky porch, back when things were simple and love was easy, and we didn't know that grief could turn people into strangers. After a while, he pulled back. He said, I talked to Rebecca. We both want to try again, to be a family again, if you'll have us. I said, of course I will. He said, it won't be easy. We have a lot to work through, a lot to rebuild.
I said, Dad's note said, these are just tools. We can build with them. We can fix what's broken. He smiled, a real smile, the first one I'd seen from him in over a year. He said, yeah, I think we can. He stayed for dinner that night. We ordered pizza and talked until late, about Mom, about Dad, about the porch and the toolbox and the fight over the video game controller, about how easy it is to lose sight of what matters. Before he left, he said, I'm going to tell my kids about this, about what happened between us, about how we almost lost each other. I want them to learn from my mistakes. I said, that's good. That's really good. He said, and I want them to know their aunt, the real you, not the villain I made you out to be. I want them to know the woman who sat with their grandmother every day, who held her hand when she was scared, who loved her enough to give up everything else. I said, I didn't give up everything. He said, yes, you did.
and it's time someone said thank you. He hugged me again, and when he left, I stood at the door and watched his car pull away, feeling like something heavy had lifted from my chest. It wasn't perfect. The hurt didn't disappear overnight, but it was a beginning, and sometimes a beginning is all you need. It's been 2 years since Mom passed away. 2 years since that terrible day in the lawyer's office. 2 years since I thought I had lost my brother and sister forever. Things aren't perfect. They probably never will be. There are still moments when the hurt resurfaces, when someone says something that brings back the pain, when we're all together and there's a brief, awkward silence that reminds us of what we went through. But we're working on it. We're trying. Rebecca and I talk on the phone once a week. We visit each other every few months. She came to my apartment last month and helped me paint the bedroom. We laughed while we worked, getting paint in our hair, reminiscing about the time we painted our childhood bedroom bright purple and Mom made us repaint it. The laughter felt good, natural, like we were finding our way back to each other, one memory at a time. Daniel and I have dinner once a month. Sometimes it's just the two of us. Sometimes he brings his kids. They're good kids. They call me Aunt now, not just by name, but with warmth in their voices. Last week, his daughter told me she wants to be a librarian like I used to be. I told her that's wonderful, but she should chase whatever dream calls to her loudest. Don't stay small for anyone, I said, but don't be afraid to stay either, if staying is where your heart leads you. Daniel later told me he appreciated that. He said he's been working on teaching his kids that there's no one right way to live, that success isn't just about how far you go, but about how present you are in the life you choose. We're rebuilding, slowly, carefully, with intention. I kept the money Mom left me. I thought about splitting it with them for a long time. The guilt would creep in late at night, whispering that maybe I didn't deserve it, maybe they were right. But Rebecca told me not to split it. She sat across from me at that cafe a year ago and said, "Mom wanted you to have it. Honor that. Honor her." So I did. But I also understood something Mom was trying to teach me with that money. It wasn't just about recognition. It was about permission. Permission to invest in myself. Permission to finally ask, what do I want? What am I called to do? I used some of it to go back to school. I'm studying to become a counselor now, a grief counselor specifically. I'm learning about loss and trauma and how families fracture under the weight of things they can't say to each other. Every day in my classes, I think about Mom, about her letter, about what she said, that love is not just a feeling, but an action, that it's showing up, being present, sitting with someone in their pain. That's what I'm learning to do professionally now, to show up for people in their darkest moments, to sit with them when they're grieving, to help them find words for feelings that seem too big to name, to guide them through the anger and the guilt and the terrible suffocating silence that comes after loss. I think about the families I work with, the ones fighting over estates and heirlooms, the ones who stop speaking because someone got the china cabinet or the wedding ring or the car. I see Daniel and Rebecca in their faces. I see myself. And I understand now, in a way I couldn't before, that grief doesn't just take the person who died. It threatens to take everyone who's left behind too. It turns love into arithmetic. It makes us forget that the person we're fighting with is also the person we're grieving with. My professor, Dr. Chen, told us something last month that I've been thinking about ever since. She said, the work of a counselor is to bear witness, to show up in someone's story and say, I see you, I hear you. That's what Mom did for me with that letter. She bore witness to my sacrifice. She saw me when no one else did. And now, that's what I want to do for others. I want to be the person who shows up, who sits with people in their mess and their pain, and doesn't try to fix it or rush it or make it prettier than it is. I just want to be present. That's Mom's real legacy. Not the money, not the house, but the lesson that presence is the deepest form of love we can offer. I still have Mom's blanket, her photo album, her lavender candles. They sit in my apartment, on a shelf I built myself. I'm learning to use Dad's old tools. Daniel gave them to me. He said, you should have these. You understand what Dad was trying to say. The tools feel good in my hands, solid, real. I've been fixing things around my apartment, a wobbly table, a loose cabinet door, small things. But each time I pick up Dad's hammer or his screwdriver, I think about what he wrote, that things are just tools. They're only valuable if they bring you together. I think I'm starting to understand what both my parents were trying to teach us, that inheritance isn't about what you receive, it's about what you do with what you've been given. Mom didn't just give me money. She gave me a mirror. She showed me who I was in her eyes, someone capable of quiet sacrifice, of steady love, of showing up day after day. And in seeing myself through her eyes, I found my calling. I'm not just becoming a counselor because I went through something hard. I'm becoming a counselor because I learned that the most profound thing you can do for another person is to see them, to witness their struggle, to sit with them in the unglamorous, unwitnessed moments and say, "You're not alone." That's what I did for Mom, and now that's what I want to do for others. Last month, I had my first official client as part of my practicum, a woman in her 50s whose mother had just passed.
She came into my office, sat down, and immediately started apologizing. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know this is silly. People lose their mothers all the time. I should be stronger." I looked at her, and I saw myself. I saw the guilt, the belief that grief is something to apologize for. I said, "You don't have to be strong right now. You just have to be here." She cried, and I sat with her. I didn't try to make it better. I didn't offer platitudes. I just showed up. After the session, she thanked me. She said, "You made me feel like it was okay to fall apart." I said, "It is okay. That's what grief is. It's falling apart so you can put yourself back together in a new shape." That night, I went home and lit one of Mom's lavender candles. I sat on my small couch in my small apartment, and I felt her presence. Not in a supernatural way, but in the way a lesson lives on after the teacher is gone, in the way love reshapes you, even after the person who loved you is no longer there to see it. I visit Mom's grave every month. I bring fresh flowers. I sit on the grass beside Dad's headstone, right next to hers, and I talk to them. I tell them about Rebecca's new promotion, about Daniel's daughter making honor roll, about my classes and my clients and the family I'm helping put back together, one session at a time. I tell them that we're okay, that we're healing, that we finally understood what they were trying to teach us all along, that things don't last, that houses crumble and money runs out, and even the strongest bodies fail. But love, real love, the kind that shows up and stays and sacrifices without keeping score, that love transforms everything it touches. It transforms the person who gives it, and it transforms the person who receives it. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it transforms the person you become after it's gone. I think that's the true inheritance, not what we receive when someone dies, but who we become in the fire of grief. Whether we let it harden us into stone, or whether we let it soften us into something more human, more compassionate, more present. Daniel chose to soften. Rebecca chose to soften. And so did I. We went through the fire. We said terrible things. We hurt each other in ways that felt permanent. But we came out the other side. And we're different now. We're not the same siblings we were before Mom died. We're more careful with each other, more intentional, more aware that time is short and words can wound, and family is fragile. But we're also more real, more honest, more willing to say, "I'm sorry," and "I was wrong," and "I need you." That's the inheritance that matters. Last week, the three of us met at the cemetery. It was the 2-year anniversary of Mom's death. We brought flowers, her favorite, white roses, and we stood together in front of her grave. Daniel put his hand on the headstone. He said, "We made it, Mom. We almost didn't, but we made it." Rebecca said, "Thank you for the letter. Thank you for seeing us, all of us." I didn't say anything out loud. I just placed my hand next to Daniel's on the cold stone and thought, I understand now. I understand what you were trying to teach us, that love isn't something you inherit. It's something you become. And I'm becoming it, every day.
in my work, in my relationships, in the way I choose to show up for the people who need me. That's Mom's real gift, not the savings account, not the recognition, but the permission to be the kind of person who stays, who shows up, who bears witness to pain and doesn't look away. If you're reading this, if you're going through something similar, if your family is fighting over things that don't really matter, if grief has turned your loved ones into strangers, if you're standing in the ruins of relationships you thought would last forever, I want you to know something. You can rebuild. Not back to what it was, but into something new. Something stronger because it's been tested.
It won't be easy. It will require you to soften when every instinct tells you to harden. It will require you to forgive when the wounds are still fresh. It will require you to see the people who hurt you as people who are also hurting. But it's possible. I'm living proof. We don't inherit love. We choose it, again and again, especially when it's hard, especially when it hurts, especially when we're standing in a lawyer's office or a cemetery or a small apartment, feeling like everything has fallen apart. That's when love matters most, not as a feeling, but as a decision, a commitment, an action. Mom knew that. She tried to tell us in her letter. It just took us a while to understand. And now, 2 years later, I carry her lesson with me every day, into my classes, into my sessions with clients, into my relationships with Daniel and Rebecca. I carry it the way you carry a candle through the dark, carefully, intentionally, knowing that the smallest flame can light the way home. That's the true inheritance, not what we receive, but what we become. Not the money or the house or the things left behind, but the love that remains, the love that transforms, the love that teaches us who we are when everything else is stripped away. And in the end, that's all that matters. That's all that lasts. As I step into my future as a counselor, I carry my mother's light with me. If this journey from heartbreak to healing resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel for more deep emotional stories about life and family. Join our community today, and let's find the light together. Until next time.